What's up everybody, David Rodriguez here, and today I'm going to be going over probably something that's a little controversial, but I am calling it the dogma of flexibility training. Now, this typically tends to be a little bit more present within cheerleading, dance, gymnastics, martial arts, and tricking, where the belief is that the only thing that you need to do to get better at those sports is to do the sport and then to do flexibility training, because they are very specific towards each other and they kind of quote unquote go hand in hand. And how they typically try to turn flexibility training into strength training and mobility training, and why that is wrong and the distinctions between those methods. So if we look at what flexibility training actually is, flexibility is passive, meaning that you are able to just put yourself into a range of motion. You are literally in the motion. You are not really doing anything. An example of this is a lunge stretch. Anybody can kind of put themselves into a lunge stretch and just hold it there, and you'll feel it, right? If you've done any kind of stretching where your body kind of locks up and seizes, because your nervous system has mechanisms in place that say, hey, we can't go any farther than this. If we go any farther than this, we're going to get injured. But again, if you've also done any kind of flexibility training, you'll know that if you kind of breathe, sit in that position for a little bit, your muscles will relax. And then you can push a little bit farther, and then they'll seize up again. And then they relax, and they'll seize back up again, and so on and so forth, right? And you can get this to where you can start turning your lunge stretch into your front splits. But then if you come back the next day, right, if you've just started, that you can't do it anymore. And it's like, well, why can't I do this anymore? It's because you've only tricked your nervous system into thinking that these ranges of motion are safe for it to be in, because you've just sat there. You haven't actually done anything in that range of motion. You just kind of unlocked everything. But then whenever you go about your normal day, guess what? Your nervous system says, nope, and it locks everything back up. And so how do we now, then we transition over to what mobility training is. Mobility is active. You're actually able to move through that range of motion. The example of the mobile exercise for your lunge stretch is going to be your walking lunges. If you've done any kind of sport, you've typically, for warm-ups, you've at least done a walking lunge. Or you've probably done weighted dumbbell lunges, probably some variation of that exercise with a bar or dumbbells. And again, it's because you actually, when you take that step forward, you have to, on the eccentric portion, you have to slow yourself down using your hamstrings, and slow yourself down, and then you have to use your hamstrings again to push yourself back up and then take the next step into whatever. So you're actually moving through that range of motion, and you can make these steps as small or as wide as you can, as comfortable as you make it. So being mobile means you are able to put yourself into that range of motion, take yourself out of it, or transition to another exercise, or transition to another kind of position or range of motion that is available to you. And typically, if you have mobility, you are able to access it cold, meaning you don't need to warm up into your splits, you don't need to warm up into anything. You can literally just go, whoop, oh, there it goes, and we're good. And now, why does this distinction matter so much? Because in mobility, you're actually developing strength, you're developing stability, you're developing your tendons, your joints. You're actually doing something to facilitate growth. Whereas in flexibility, again, you're just there, you're not really doing anything. You're just sitting there. Nothing's happening. And so the distinction matters primarily within these sports when it comes to the competitive version of these sports. So when these sports do become competitive, it typically follows this cycle. The student that is currently engaged in the sport, they have their coach or their teammate, and the coach is whatever, and they're making them do these things that they really can't do, forcing them to try and put these kids into ranges of motion or even yourself if you were in that situation that you weren't prepared for yet. And then so when something happens and something gets tweaked, it becomes, oh, well, hey, this is just the industry standard. This is how we've always done it. It's tradition. It's like, don't, like, you just obviously weren't ready for it. And almost like putting the blame on either yourself or the athlete who apparently wasn't ready for the obnoxious and ill-equipped training regimen that was implemented. And again, so they'll say, well, my coach did it to me. And then they'll say, well, that coach's coach did it to them. And then this is how we breed great athletes. And then if you've ever talked, and in my experience, almost every single gymnast, cheerleader, dance person always complains about back problems, or they complain about joint problems, like, oh, my knees have been destroyed, oh, my ankles, oh, my shoulders, my wrists. Literally almost every joint under the sun is hurt, and they're like, oh, ugh. And it's like, well, I thought this flexibility training in doing the sport was supposed to help you become more resilient, stronger, better, whatever, right? Clearly that's not the case, because the way it typically ends up going is that they apply way too much force than the capacity of the athlete to handle. If the force is much greater, i.e. cranking down on an athlete greater than their capacity, it's going to lead to injuries. And it may not happen immediately, but massive amounts of force applied over time is going to create like tears, and that tear is going to keep going and going and going, and then until one day the body's not going to be able to handle it anymore. And then boom, your chronic injury all of a sudden becomes boom, very acute, and it's like, oh man, nope, and now you're out for the season. When instead, and it's typically done in the idea of, oh hey, this is competition season, so we really gotta get everything together. When instead, if you had taken the time about probably maybe 6 months prior to actually integrate some proper strength and conditioning, some proper mobility training, and proper flexibility training, guess what? You probably would have been able to build the athlete's capacity, and then you could have, boom, had some gains instead of being like, it's crunch time. Okay, well, hey, you don't have your middle splits, so you really need this. So we're just gonna go for it and crank down and whatever. Or even if the athlete typically does have their splits, it's like, okay, now it's over split time, and they haven't even built the strength and capacity to handle themselves in a normal split. Because in a normal split, you're just holding yourself there, right? Again, there's no strength being developed, no stability, no resiliency, no nothing. You're just sitting there. And because the methodologies become mixed up, especially within these 5 sports, because rarely, if ever, do they invest in actual strength and conditioning coach. And again, it's all industry standard and it's tradition. These are what we're doing, and this is what we've always done. So why change anything? Because they try to make flexibility strength training, and they try to make flexibility mobility training, and that's not how that works at all. Strength is strength training, mobility is mobility training, flexibility is flexibility training. And I know that it sounds like I hate flexibility training. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying this dogmatic approach to one methodology is wrong, because every single methodology has its place in an athlete's lifetime, in an athlete's career. And to only strength train, and it'd be the same thing for strength training. If you're only strength training all the time, at some point you're probably going to either hurt yourself, or you're probably either going to see a plateau. Same thing with mobility training. If you're only doing mobility training, at some point you'll probably end up experiencing some sort of plateau. Or if you try to substitute it for strength training, you're probably not going to get super strong. You'll become very mobile, and you'll become strong in another part. But if you want to have like overall strength training is probably going to be your best bet. Same thing with flexibility. If you want to be flexible, probably doing strength training is probably not going to be the best method to achieve that. Now, this kind of turned into a rant at the end, but it's something that I'm very passionate about. And in the second part of this video, I'll be going over more smarter approaches to stretching, smart approaches to mobility and integrating strength training into either your daily regimen or into things that you can do at your studio and or your gym. My name is David Rodriguez. I hope y'all learned something. If you like this kind of content, please like, subscribe, follow me Instagram at hotrod_intricate33. And I will see you on the next video.